ready.
Okay. When some of the first pioneers came out here, there was a road, an Indian trail actually, from Dayton into Oregon City and Portland, and it crossed over the Tualatin River just east of what we now call Meridian Road. And Zenas Brown came around the Horn in 1850 and got a donation land claim. He got one of the first ones before the act went through, so he got 620 acres. And he put a ferry in his property to cross the river so that when wagons would come to travel, he could charge a fee. And we now know this area as Browns Ferry Park. The ferry lasted only a couple of years because later on Sam Galbraith came and put in a ferry a little further to the west because Boone's Ferry Road then connected Wilsonville into Portland, and it was a quicker route. And so Browns Ferry was kind of phased out, was not used nearly as much as the Galbraith Ferry, which was where the bridge is now going across the Tualatin River.
How did they get changed from Galbraith to Boone's Ferry? Where did Boone's name come from?
Boone's name came from a grandson of Daniel Boone, who came out here, Alfonso Boone, and settled in what we now call the Wilsonville area. And he had a ferry across the Willamette River, and he built a road then from Wilsonville into Portland, and it went through this area, Tualatin, crossing over Galbraith's land, and then Galbraith put a ferry in there. So Boone's Ferry Road connected with Galbraith's Ferry, which then it went on into Portland.
Okay.
Or to Oregon City.
Okay, now where the Galbraith Ferry was before, so that road is all gone and everything now?
No, where the
Browns Ferry? Okay.
Yes, yes. However, it crossed over the river onto what we now know as Childs Road. So Childs Road is still there, and Browns Ferry led people, across the river to Childs Road.
Okay.
So that was right now. If you go down Nyberg, keep going to the north, you would just cross over there. At Childs Road is right across the river.
Okay. So how long ago was that went away?
I'm not exactly sure, but probably it only lasted a few years.
Oh, okay. Oh.
Browns Ferry. Galbraith Ferry lasted until 1856 when the people got together and put a bridge in, a homemade bridge that the people paid for themselves.
Okay.
And so then the area was called Galbraith. Pardon me, delete. Then the area was called Bridgeport because there was a bridge.
Okay.
That was in 1856. And that's the general location of where the bridge is today.
Okay. So that's how Bridgeport got its name then?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. So do you want to talk about Bridgeport then in that area?
Well, yes, the Bridgeport area became the first commercial center here. There was a blacksmith shop set up because naturally when wagons would come to the river crossing, there would be a need for horseshoes or oxen shoes or to fix a wagon wheel. And so one of our pioneers set up a blacksmith shop, Billy Greenwood set up a blacksmith shop at Galbraith and did a good run business. And then there was very soon a rooming house because people would travel up and down the valley and they couldn't make somewhere in a day, so they would stay at the rooming house at night. And there was also a general store in the same place.
Okay, now did they travel on the river or on the land?
Generally speaking on the land, but people traveled on the river too, of course. The Indians used the river for their highway.
Okay.
A lot of people used the river also. They would raft, build a kind of a raft and pole down the river.
Okay. Now, the ferries didn't interfere with that. They could get by.
Well, there weren't that many rafts and there weren't that many ferries, so.
Yeah. Okay. Trying to picture what it's like back then. That'd be different. So, where Bridgeport is now, where all the stores are and all that stuff, that was basically just all rural area for.
That was just all farmland, yes. However, the road from the bridge at Bridgeport, it went north a ways and then it kind of, and I think it's still the same road. It was called Bridgeport Road. That road is still there, Bridgeport Road.
Which is different from Boone's Ferry?
Pardon me?
That's different from Boone's Ferry Road?
Yes, it's cut off of Boone's Ferry Road.
Okay. And then they came. They were talking last night in that thing we were at about the it was?
Mm-hmm.
How long ago or when did they start all that stuff for that area? Was that?
Oh, I can remember them hauling gravel out of there when I was a kid. So the
Okay.
gravel business went on for quite a while.
Okay. And they used all that resources to build this area?
I suppose, yes.
Okay.
Sold rock.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Now when I-5 came in, how did that affect everything?
Well, we need to go back a little bit
Okay.
and talk about Old Town,
Okay.
because Tualatin has always kind of moved around to where this newest mode of transportation was. So at first it was Brown's Ferry. The road from Dayton to Oregon City was Brown's Ferry, and then then the Galbraith Bridge in Bridgeport, where the road from Boone's Ferry would go across Galbraith Ferry, and Boone's Ferry went on into Portland, and then the bridge there. So that's where the town was, if you could call it a town, was at Galbraith or Bridgeport, which is the same location, just a different name. And then in 1889, Southern Pacific put a railroad through this area, and it was right up here, east and west. And John Sweek, who owned this property right here, was an enterprising young man, and he plotted out a town and sold lots. And there was a depot up here, and pretty soon there was a hotel and a store, lots of business, lots sold for homes, and it became the town. Then people still would use Bridgeport, but generally it was more up here.
So that was just all centered around the railroad then?
That was all centered around the railroad, yes. Meanwhile, John Taylor also put a ferry in up on Highway 99 from Dayton into Portland. Taylor's Ferry Road, which some of it still exists, he first built a ferry, and then he built a road from Taylor's Ferry into Dayton, and then from Taylor's Ferry into Portland. He had a ferry, and then later he built a bridge.
Now you're talking the Dayton that's down by Newburgh?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So there were two roads from Dayton. One went up this way, and one came down this way from Dayton. Mm-hmm.
So like on each side?
Yeah, right.
Okay. So what was big in Dayton that that was just another center?
Yeah, I don't know exactly why. Dayton was, they had a roundhouse. Bureau of Indian Affairs was at Dayton. Maybe we better leave that part out, because I'm not exactly sure about Dayton.
Okay. Yeah, that's not here or there. Okay. So yeah. Give me some introductions about those different places. Like, let's do a couple for Bridgeport. Say, let's see, how can we do Bridgeport? Say the Bridgeport area was one of the first areas of commerce. Is that true?
Well, actually, Galbraith was.
Galbraith?
Yeah.
Which is sort of. Okay. Yeah. Start with Galbraith then.
Okay. Where Sam Galbraith put his ferry in across the Tualatin River, that became the first center of commerce in what we now know as the Tualatin area. It was called Galbraith because the ferry was Galbraith's ferry.
Okay, that works. Yeah. They didn't have to create their names. Just use what you got. Okay, and Bridgeport, that'll be good for Galbraith. Now
Bridgeport came in 1856, when the citizens of this part of the county, the two counties, built a bridge.
Okay, that'll be good for that. And the Old Town area, that's just basically we got the.
This is Old Town. We're in Old Town right now.
Yeah.
Town was organizing. There were lots more people moving in. There was a nice church built just north of here, Congregational Church, built in 1893. There was an Oddfellows Hall, a hotel, the grocery store, lots of homes built. The Grange organized and met upstairs in the store, and that's where the first post office was.
And now all those buildings are gone?
There are 3 buildings left from Old Town. One is Bertelson's Animal Clinic, which was the Mack House, and the house just north of that, which was the Wish House, and then what we call the little white houses was next to the railroad track. Those three still remain from Old Town.
And then the trestle was right at the end of that road? Or not the trestle, the station, the train station?
The station was just one on the north side of the railroad track.
Oh, it's on the north side?
Yeah, very, very close.
Yeah, there's a picture, one of those old pictures just taken right from over here in the corner in a really tall tree.
Mm-hmm.
They said the guy climbs it. I want to get that same shot, but I don't know. I could use like one of the fire engines.
Gosh, maybe so. You know, there were houses here, and they might have been on the roof of those houses.
No, it was higher.
You think so?
Yeah, the picture, I think the captain said it's a real tall tree.
Really?
Because it was up there. He was up, yeah, up above buildings and the houses.
That's a
and everything.
wonderful picture that looks down this way.
Yep.
Oh, wow, that's a wonderful picture, yeah.
And it took me a long time to figure out where it was. It's like, where is he at?
Should have asked me.
It's like, okay, right there.
Well, the next big important thing that happened to this area was in 1892, John L. Smith came and set up a sawmill on the river. And he brought all of his family with him, and they had the first payroll in Tualatin, hired a lot of people, and did a big business.
Now, where was that?
That would be in what we now call the park. That would be in the park.
That was the old sawmill that is in the pictures down there,
Mhm.
right beside the trestle?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Or do you not want me to talk about that now?
No, that's good because I'm going to use those pictures. Trying
Uh-huh.
to think. So they had a lot of people working down there too.
Oh yeah, it was a big business. We have a nice picture in our collection of, well, lots of pictures of the sawmill, and then there was these two horses pulling a wagon with this enormous log on it, and the three Smith women who are all large ladies sitting on top of it. It's just a great picture.
Yeah, I hadn't seen that one.
Oh, you haven't seen that? Oh,
Is it in that big white book?
I think so.
Okay. Okay, so like that. Oh, we were going to do the introduction. We were talking about the old town. You were talking about it, but I wasn't rolling because the train. You were talking about how he founded the town. And
John Sweek founded the town.
Yeah.
Called it Tualatin. Before that, Tualatin was more up in the Stafford area. There's a precinct that was called Tualatin. But John Sweek named this area Tualatin, and plotted out a map, town plot, and Smock over in Sherwood did the exact same thing on his property. Laid out the streets
So
and sold lots.
Where does the name Tualatin come from? Because the river's named Tualatin.
The river's named Tualatin. It came from the Atfality Indians. Those are the Native Americans who lived in this area.
Okay. They named the river, and then the town came after it?
Yeah, the town came definitely after the Indians in the river, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
See, there are many different spellings and pronunciations to Tualatin. It's Tualatin, Tualatin, Quality, Falatine. It goes on and on.
I know that.
The Native Americans' language was so different from ours, and there's no native speakers left, that we don't really exactly know how it was pronounced or spelled.
Okay. List here. Okay.
About 1906, the Oregon Electric Railroad Company put through a line from Eugene into Portland, and that changed the whole atmosphere of this area. At that time, John L. Smith had purchased a lot of land down by the railroad. There was a new depot. He had built a big company store to provide supplies for all of his workers. And he began selling lots and building buildings and building homes. And this Old Town area generally was phased out as the people moved up towards Uptown, I guess you would call it. They called it Newtown.
Were those two families sort of in competition, like the Smiths? Not really.
Well, the Smiths, the Sweek, by that time Sweek had died.
Okay.
And so the family was no longer all that interested. Yeah.
Okay. So he just sort of took over. And
John L. Smith was quite an entrepreneur and had all kinds of businesses going. How important it is. But up here in Old Town, there were two saloons.
Okay.
And that's one thing that kept Should I start this over?
No, go ahead. Yeah,
Oh,
just keep going.
there were 2 saloons up here in Old Town, and that kept the area going really well. Then when Prohibition came in, the saloons were closed down, and so the area became less and less attractive to people. The new town was more interesting to them.
So they didn't build the bars and that up in a new town for
No,
first? Yeah.
not at first, no.
Hmm.
It was quite a while actually before another saloon was built.
Yeah, because I remember like in the one pictures they had the row of houses is right down there by the railroad.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then right across, from Althea's house, they had the one picture going down where it's all shops now too, but it was all different back then.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
it was all dirt. Those are really interesting.
Yeah, we have some wonderful pictures.
Yeah. Okay, anything else that you can remember about just that part of town and Newtown and that?
No, except the Congregational Church burned down in 1910, and a new Methodist church was built just right over there on that corner.
Okay. So this was in Newtown though too, wasn't it, this church?
Yes, but it was in Newtown, but it wasn't built until this one burned down in 1925.
Okay.
And then the Smith family donated land for this building down on Boone's Ferry.
Okay. And that was built in 1925?
Pardon me, 1926.
Start with either Winona Cemetery or the Grange,
Okay,
and just to go ahead and talk about or bring it up, and say
Mhm.
the Winona Cemetery or the Winona Grange.
okay. Winona Grange was organized in 1895 here in Tualatin, and they had their meetings upstairs in the old Cummins store. The organization is still going strong after all these years. And then in 1900, Winona Cemetery was established along Tualatin Road. It was on the donation land claim of Isaac Ball, who donated the land himself. And he and his whole family are buried there. Prior to that time, people buried their dead on their own private property or up at Robert Byrd Cemetery, or some even in at Portland Cemetery.
Now, where'd that name come from, the Winona?
The name Winona comes from John J.R.C. Thompson's oldest daughter, who died, and her name was Winona, and he wanted both the Grange and the cemetery named after her. And he was a very prominent person, and so he got his way, although I don't think everybody was real happy about it. But that's where the name came from. It was his oldest daughter, and Winona means oldest daughter in one of the Native American tongues.
Yeah, that's right. You do hear that a lot. Okay. So the cemetery, that was formed basically as the start of the town, or that was the first?
Well, town started in 1889, up here,
Okay.
1900.
Okay.
People had been here for 50 years or so before the cemetery started.
And then just everybody used their own property then?
Well, yes, or they go up to Robert Byrd Cemetery. My great-grandmother died in 1898, and she was buried at Robert Byrd, and that's a long jolting wagon ride to the Stafford area.
Okay.
Do you know where Robert Byrd Cemetery is?
No.
It's way up in Stafford. It's a long ways.
Okay.
And that was very difficult. I'm really kind of surprised there wasn't a cemetery here earlier. I know the Hedges family had their own cemetery on their property.
Okay. Some of the big landholders maybe. Are those cemeteries still around, or did it?
No, they were disinterred and reburied in Winona Cemetery.
Okay.
Although I do think there were some people buried whose graves have been forgotten and built over. There's an old legend that 2 Indians are buried in Winona Cemetery.
Now, would that be bad then, or good? Or
No, it'd be good, I think.
Yeah, I know. Why would? Yeah, because they did their own separate sort of.
Yeah, I don't quite know what the story is, but some of the townspeople didn't want them buried there. But so they were buried there during the night. That's what we heard. So it's kind of an interesting legend.
Yeah, I'm always interested to see what went on back then, how people worked together or didn't work together. The Grange and its function and how people used that back then compared to now. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yes. Well, the Grange was organized to unite farmers. Most of the people in the area were farmers, And the Grange gave them buying power. They would buy in blocks and would give them the newest information about farming. Also, it would raise the social strata of their lives, because work on a farm, especially back then, was pretty daunting and pretty hard on people, especially women. In the Grange, from the very beginning, women could hold any office that a man could hold. And women were very much admired and built up, not pushed down.
So it was basically run by women then?
No.
Or was it? Okay.
No, why would you think that?
Well, because you're saying that they could hold all the offices.
They could hold all the offices, but still it was a man's society.
Okay.
And I think until about the 1930s, women began to be elected master of the Grange. But women held a lot of offices and put on big dinners and did charity work. Lots of educational programs going on. The newest state land colleges, ours would be Oregon College of Agriculture. The newest methods of agriculture and the newest homemaking methods. So it was very, very helpful to the local farmers, and it gave them time to get together and visit with each other and enjoy the company of each other. Kind of ease the burden of farm life.
Yeah, I didn't know about the education. That's interesting.
Yes, they were highly educated. The Grange started rural mail delivery and also electrification of rural areas. The Grange still has a strong lobby.
So you can see how that's different from now.
Now the Grange, because it's a historical organization, we're into community service, and we do a lot of things locally here in Tualatin. We have a Grange garden where we grow organic vegetables for the food pantry and for the farmers market. We give dictionaries to children, and we hold parties and events in our beautiful Grange Hall, which is a perfect dance floor and a nice stage. So we're enjoying our Grange Hall.
Yeah, it seems a lot more active than, I don't know of other places, but any other place I've lived.
Yeah, well, we've done quite a bit to make it an interesting place, to make it a place where we appreciate the heritage of the Grange and what it can do, how it can benefit the community, even though it's an old building. It was built in 1940, not the most attractive building in the world, but it is historical and it is useful. And it can very much be a community center. It was once and it's beginning to be again. I'm really happy about that.
Yeah, that's important.
I think it is.
Back then, and it is to be more now, I think, too, because time's changing. I think people are going to have to work together more.
Yeah, it's a nice connection from the past to the current times.
So how can we get people more involved in that, something like that?
Well, we're going to be having, now we're starting to have 2 events a year where the public is invited to have potluck dinners and dancing or plays or something like that, where people can come and enjoy the Grange Hall and enjoy each other and kind of get together as a community. It's working out very well. So we hope to be continuing that.
Over at the cemetery, when we were meeting with Larry, we had talked about some families and that. Did you want to talk about any of the families that, not yours necessarily, that are over there?
Yes, many of our Tualatin donation land claim pioneers are buried in Winona Cemetery. Both Edward and Elizabeth Byram, and most of their children are buried there. Isaac Ball and his wife. A lot of the Robbins family, although a lot of the Robbins are up at Robert Bird also. Of course, my family, the Jurgens and the Martinazzis, are there. The Castiles. You can just go down the line, the Shavers.
Yeah, I'll go get some shots of those stones.
Yes, those are important stones. Yeah.
Okay. So what about, where's the John Sweek and where are they buried?
They're buried at Riverview.
Okay.
Yeah, they were a little more affluent and better connected. So they, of course, John Sweek died before Winona Cemetery was established.
Okay.
But they're buried up there. Yeah, he was very well known and well connected, and so he wanted to be buried in a nicer place, I guess.
Now where's that at?
Riverview is on Taylor's Ferry Road.
Okay. 'Cause, okay. 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 Okay.
It's off Macadam.
Okay.
And the Nybergs are all buried at Winona Cemetery also. It's a pleasant little place, and now it's managed by descendants of those early pioneers.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, it's still somebody. It's not because a lot of cemeteries are corporate owned now.
No, it's still privately owned
Yeah.
by the Cemetery Association.
I'd like to get some more audio on the cemetery, but I don't know what to talk about.
Pardon me?
I'd like to get some more audio on the cemetery, but I don't know what to talk about.
We could talk about some of the people that had tragic deaths.
Okay.
One was a young boy, 17 years old, who jumped into the Tualatin River to cool off after weeding onions and drowned. And his brother tried to pull him out. And it was just a horrible tragedy. And his grave is marked with a little homemade metal marker that his brother made for him. Another was a little girl, 6 years old, who lived right here in an old town and climbed up on a dresser and pulled the top of it down on herself and was crushed. There's another woman who jumped into a well and head first and committed suicide because she was despondent. There's some, and babies, lots of babies buried there. Lots of babies.
So how many people are there? Or just guessing, is it?
Boy, you know, that's something I don't know how many people are buried there. I suppose 1,000.
Yeah.
You know, back before there was so much medical care, women would generally have their babies at home, and if there was a problem, oftentimes the babies would die.
Yeah. So that was all the main, going over there.
And graves were dug by hand, and in the early days, coffins were made by the family themselves.
And they're still using it at cemetery, right?
Oh yes, there are many lots left.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't really see a lot of funerals. That's what I
You don't
drive-
see a lot, but there are some.
Yeah, I don't drive by as much anymore living on this side.
And then, of course, there are places for, they'll cut this out, of course, cremations.
Oh,
There are spots for cremation burials also.
Yeah.
Back in 1900, different families would buy a big plot of 7 lots, so that they would have that for years to come. When someone died in their family, they would be buried there. And so you'll see on this original plat map, the Nybergs bought a big plot, the Byrons bought a big plot, the different people, the Jurgens, the Martinazzis, the Castilles, would buy this big plot. Instead of just buying a grave when somebody died, the Nybergs, they would buy a big plot to take care of their family.
Yeah. So was it always 7? What was that number?
Well, I don't know that just how many would fit into the plot. It was all surveyed out.
Oh, by a certain.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, do it all at once. That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Now we wanted to talk about I-5 coming back too.
Yes.
How that-
Well, the area really changed when I-5 in the early 50s went through Tualatin. It split the community apart. It brought jobs to Tualatin. The land began to be developed into housing developments and commercial businesses. It changed a lot. The farms basically broke up, and there were very few farms left. Most people then could hop on the freeway and go into town, that is to Portland, and for work instead of seeking a farm job. So it changed a lot of things.
So would you say for the better, for worse, or?
Well, of
6
course
one, half dozen of the other?
I'm of the older generation, and I like things the way they were when I was a kid. That's just the way people are, I think. It's inevitable that it happened.
Yeah, and it did really come right down through the middle of this area.
It did cut down through the middle of the Willamette Valley, despoiling some of the most wonderful farmland in the world, all being built over with concrete and homes and buildings.
Yeah, I was talking to Arnie, and he said he used to sit over there where, basically where I-5 is now, just watch the sunset over the walnut tree there, and that's there.
Yeah.
He said that's where he used to eat his lunch over there, and
Uh-huh.
sit over there, and it's like, man, that was a lot different back then than it is now.
Yeah. A lot different.
Yeah. We don't have a whole lot of pictures of that area either, really. The old ones.
Of where I-5 was?
Yeah, like around the Nyberg house and that?
Around the Nyberg house, there would be some, yeah.
Is there?
There is, in our book, we have a picture of the freeway when it was just like 2 lanes.
Huh.
Yeah.
And when did that come through?
In the 1950s. Yeah, I can remember hearing, I was married in 1952, and I could remember hearing them driving the posts, and it was very, very loud, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We're about where would it be? You remember where the Methodist Church used to be? Yeah, back behind there.
By the True Value?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Kind of a little bit more south. Well, I can see why people don't like the train horn, the noise. It is pretty persistent.
Yeah, I don't know, I agree. Okay.
Yeah, in 1854, John Taylor put a ferry on his property across the Tualatin River and built a road to Dayton and then into Portland, and charged, of course, for the fare. And Taylor's Ferry actually was the first post office in the area. Before Tualatin had a post office, there was a post office at Taylor's Ferry. It was an important place, and the school held their meetings there at Taylor's Ferry. And then in 1869, John Taylor sold his property and moved away, and the post office then moved to Tualatin. Of course, where his ferry was, later a wooden bridge was built, covered bridge.
Now where's that?
At Taylor's Ferry.
There was a covered bridge there before?
All the bridges were covered.
Until
I can even remember covered bridges. They were covered so that the horses wouldn't spook by looking into the water, and also to protect the timbers.
Yeah. I heard that from you guys that was the reason for the covered bridges was the Taylor's Ferry. Now what about now how did Tigard come in then? Where did that?
Well, Tigard's it was on Taylor's Ferry Road. I'm assuming that Taylor's Ferry Road went clear through Tigard, Pacific Highway. Yeah.
Okay. Because that seems like, is it where the bridge is now? Is that where the ferry was?
Yes.
Because that seems like such a huge drop there. I guess it wasn't like that back then, but I'm not sure. Because I used to walk underneath that bridge. I lived right in those apartments.
Yeah.
So I used to walk my dog underneath there all the time.
Yeah, it's probably built up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not near as smooth like flat as over here.
Right.
It's just a big drop off, and that bridge is up in the air.
Yeah, it's been. I think it's not the same as it was, because he would have built his ferry, put it in at the lowest place, no doubt.
Where it's nice and level on one side.
Yeah, I would think so. And we don't really know how they got these ferries across the river. If some people say that there was a boat, that somebody would row a boat and pull it, but that seems kind of strange. Or then a cable would run from the ferry raft itself over to a tree on the other side, and a horse would walk around pulling it, until it tightened up. But that's an interesting.
Well, how's the one that's still in operation down there? I went across that one.
Well, that's it's got a motor.
That's a motor, yeah.
Yeah. That's a lot different.
I was thinking the cables would be probably about the best way that they did it.
Yeah, the cables, but then how were the cables operated?
Okay.
Back in the olden days, they had to be some power to pull them along.
Okay.
So I would think a windlass around a tree or a post, probably pulled by horses, would probably work. I've always been curious about that.
Yeah, that is interesting, because you couldn't leave cables across it, when you weren't going across, because that's what I was wondering about the other boats going through.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's interesting that takes so much to get across. There's so much to go involved to get across a little body of water like this just to get over that.
Yeah, it is interesting. And the pioneers, they ferried across rivers a lot.
Oh, yeah,
they forded the river, or they rode a ferry, and I've never figured out how those ferries were operated.
Now, they have this anything to do with this really, but it might be, but like there were some places where I grew up where in the river they just basically you drove across the riverbed right in the water,
Oh, because it was pretty shallow.
Yeah,
Oh.
and it was like, it was only about that deep, and the road was actually the bottom across the river.
Really?
Yeah, and we had a lot of shale up there. It
Uh-huh.
was in Ohio, and obviously when there's rivers up, you can't cross.
Yeah.
In the wintertime and that, it was closed.
Hmm. Well, I think we heard that here by our bridge, that in the summer the wagons could cross.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, how deep
Mhm.
it was. Yeah, wagons would be different too, because then you
Yeah.
have to get the horses and. Okay. So basically, all the river crossings that they used back then are the same ones we use right now.
They are,
Yeah.
except Brown's Ferry.
Yeah.
Well, Brown was involved in a possible murder, and so he sold out. I think in 1861, maybe no before then. I think in the 1850s.
That's the guy who was street and died.
Yeah,
Yeah, I remember that from your play.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So that may be another reason why his ferry died out. That he skedaddled out of the area.
That makes sense.
Everybody was, pretty suspicious of him, even though he was cleared for lack of evidence. Everybody thought he did it, and so he wasn't held in very high esteem.
So what was he? Did the guy owe him money or something, or what was the motive?
Yeah, he owed him money and didn't pay it back or something like that. Yeah. And he was supposed to be a doctor, an eclectic doctor, and so he treated him, but not very well, apparently.
Well, you don't know what his motive was. It might have worked perfect.
Yeah, and I don't know where he's buried. Probably somewhere on that property. But most of Brown's property was on the other side of the road.
Okay.
Because about where Nyberg Lane is, all south of that was a Goodall claim. So Brown's Ferry was right on the edge.
Now, where's Nyberg
His-
Lane?
If you just go down Nyberg, just keep going instead of turning up 65th.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I never get out to that area very often. I need to go out there and get out and shoot some footage for this. Okay, anything else about I-5 that you can remember? Oh, one thing, yeah. When did they find the mastodon? What were they building? Were they building Fred Meyer then?
It was about before Fred Meyer, was about in 1961 or so.
Were they building
in
something
1960s.
then?
No, there were just a couple of houses there, the Thompson houses.
Okay. How did they come across that?
Well, the old timers knew it was there,
Oh,
because my mother wrote in 1959 that they had found big bones and sent them on to some institute, and they said yes, they were prehistoric animals. And then this marshal, Charlie Roberts, had one of the elephant teeth or something. He said there were elephants used to roam here, and he told his kid, Bob George, about that. And so then when George was trying to find a project for his geology class, he said he'd dig up the mastodon. So that's how that came about.
okay. So they just found little pieces and then sort of left it until somebody else came along.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a remarkable thing, I think.
Yeah, it is. It's that whole area. This area just has so much involved in it. It's weird. It's like as soon as you find out one thing, it's like then you find something else.
Oh my gosh, yeah, yeah.
So, like way back when Tualatin was still forming and that, and most of the roads were still all dirt and that, like when did they start really putting in the paved roads?
Well, they gravelled first. And John Nyberg had a gravel pit on his property. So they mined the gravel there, and he sold it to the city, and they spread it on I suppose, in the 20s and 30s. I know Jurgens Road was gravel until 1970 or so.
Okay.
So a lot of the roads were gravelled. I don't think paving really came about until maybe the 40s.
So that was the gravel pit over by the Nyberg house over here?
It was.
Where was
It was. Let's see. You know where that Forest Rim Apartments are? You know where Nyberg Woods is, the big shopping center.
Yeah.
We're next to that,
Okay.
and it's right there. The pit's still there.
Really?
I think it is. Yeah.
Huh.
It's filled up with water.
Okay.
Well, you got enough info?
Yeah, I think so. Anything else you can think about that you really like to talk about, or I don't know, one of your favorite things that people ask about?
Oh, I don't know. I just think often about what it was like when I was a kid here, and I knew everything. I knew everybody, and life was so pleasant. You know, we'd walk where we lived on Juergens Road. We'd walk all the way down to Sunday school or walk up to school, and you walk down to the white store and get an ice cream cone for a nickel, and it was just fun. I remember one thing especially. I always liked horses, and my grandfather lived up on Sagart, and my dad, who lived over here, borrowed his horse and wagon one time, and when he was taking it back, I don't know how old I was, 8 or 10, he let me drive the horse. So, oh my gosh, I was so thrilled. And I stood up there driving the horse, and as I was driving past the Sweek House and the brick store, I was kind of looking to see if anybody could see that was me driving the horse. So we got up to past the school, and then had to take a left on Sagart. The horse just turned around, went right down the road. So I come up from my grandfather's place. The horse just turned right in at the barn and stopped. The horse knew where it was going. I wasn't driving it at all. I can remember that so clearly, and I was just a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
Dad was kind of nice that way.
Yeah, that's neat how you can have memories like that.
Mm-hmm. And we would go, when we were kids, we would go down to the river and play. My uncle, my great uncle, my dad's uncle, had a place down on the river, and we would just walk down the bottom land, which is kind of off Hazelbrook right now. Walk down to the river. It was just on the other side of the golf course, and there used to be a little river park down there, and Dad would kind of fish or sleep, and we kids would play in the water. We had what we called table rock, and we'd jump on it, and it was really fun.
Yeah, it's nice having the water around.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We'd always stop at our Uncle Bill's, and he had a well on his back porch, and he had a bucket and with a rope on it, and he would drop it down in the well and bring it up and give us a drink of water out of that well.
Never seen one of those wells like that. You see them on TV, and I've never actually seen a real one. Yeah, that's good. Okay, anything else that you want to talk about?
Guess not.
Okay.